Welcome back, Golden Family. If you're new here, hit that subscribe button because you're about to witness a romance that will leave you breathless. Now, let's go straight into the story. No, not him. It can't be him. Emma Smith's hand trembled as she reached for the brass nameplate, Michael Blackwood, CO. The polished metal felt cold against her fingertips, each letter spelling out a name that had lived in the quiet corners of her heart for 15 years. She'd prepared for this interview for weeks, researching the company, studying the case files, rehearsing her credentials. What she hadn't prepared for was this. The mahogany door felt heavier than it should have as she pushed it open. Sunlight streamed through floor-to-ceiling windows, casting long shadows across an office that screamed success and power. And there, behind an imposing desk, sat the boy who'd once helped her through calculus homework. Except he wasn't a boy anymore. The phone slipped from his hand, clattering against the polished surface of his desk. Emma? Time folded in on itself. Those storm-gray eyes were exactly as she remembered, intense, searching, capable of seeing straight through every wall she'd ever built. But the face had changed. Sharper now, more defined. The soft edges of youth had been carved away by years and responsibility, leaving behind a man who commanded boardrooms and made million-dollar decisions. She stood frozen in the doorway, watching recognition flood his features. This was the face that had haunted every relationship she tried to build since graduation. The standard against which every other man had been measured and found wanting. "Hello, Mr. Blackwood." Her voice came out steadier than she felt, years of professional training kicking in to mask the earthquake happening inside her chest. Behind her, she heard the soft patter of small feet, and a voice that made her heart stop completely. "Daddy, is this the lady who's gonna help Lily talk?" Daddy. The word rewrote everything she thought she knew about this moment. Of course he'd moved on. Of course he'd found someone, married someone, had children with someone who wasn't the scholarship kid who'd been too terrified to tell him how she felt. Michael's voice was strained, his eyes never leaving Emma's face. "Jake, buddy, can you go find Sarah? But I want to meet the nanny lady." Now Jake. The little boy, his son, disappeared with a dramatic sigh that would have been endearing under any other circumstances. The silence that followed stretched taut with everything they'd never said, every conversation they'd never had, every moment they'd almost reached for something more but pulled back at the last second. "You look." Michael started, then stopped. His hand moved through his hair in that gesture she remembered from late nights studying, from moments when the weight of expectations became too much. "Different." "It's been 15 years, she finished for him, forcing professionalism into her voice like armor. "Not that different." His voice dropped to something soft and dangerous. "You still do that thing with your hands when you're nervous?" Emma looked down, horrified to find she was indeed twisting her fingers together, a tell she thought she'd conquered years ago. "Mr. Blackwood, perhaps we should discuss your daughter's needs." "Don't?" The single word stopped her cold. "Excuse me? Don't call me Mr. Blackwood." "Not you." He moved closer and she caught that scent she remembered, cedar and something uniquely him that no amount of expensive cologne could mask. "I've spent 15 years wondering what happened to you, and now you're standing in my office calling me Mr. Blackwood like we're strangers." "We are strangers." The lie burned her throat. "You have a family. Children. I'm here professionally." Something flickered across his face, confusion mixed with something that looked like pain. "Emma? Where's their mother?" The question escaped before she could stop it. She tried to disguise it as professional inquiry, but it carried the weight of 15 years of wondering if he'd found what they'd been too scared to reach for. Michael went very still. When he spoke, his voice was barely above a whisper. "She died." The words hung between them like a confession, rewriting every assumption she'd made about his life, his choices, his happiness. "Oh God, Michael, I'm sorry. The file didn't say." 18 months ago. Car accident. A drunk driver ran a red light. His voice was hollow, mechanical, like he'd repeated these facts so many times they'd lost all meaning. "I've been raising them alone since." Alone. The word changed everything. The successful businessman facade, the perfect life she'd imagined, the family she'd assumed he'd built with someone else. "The twins are yours?" she whispered. "Biologically? No." His laugh held no humor. "Sarah was my sister. Single mom struggled but was doing great with them. Jake and Lily, they're mine in every way that matters now." The office seemed to tilt slightly. His sister. The sister he'd talked about during those long library sessions, worried about, loved fiercely even when she made choices he couldn't understand. "They were 4 when it happened," Michael continued, his voice growing rougher with each word. "Old enough to remember her, to understand what they lost. Lily was in the car during the accident. She hasn't spoken since. Emma's chest tightened. This wasn't the story she'd written in her head. A successful businessman who'd moved on, found love, built the perfect family. This was grief and sacrifice and a man who'd stepped up when the unthinkable happened. So when Jake calls you daddy, it's the only word he's ever known for me. Michael's voice cracked slightly. And Lily? Lily hasn't spoken since the funeral. Not a word. That's why I need. He looked at her and 15 years collapsed into nothing. That's why I need you. The irony was devastating. The boy who'd been too scared to tell her he loved her was now trusting her with the two most important people in his world. I should go, she whispered. This is too complicated. There are other specialists. Please. The word stopped her cold. I've been through 12 nannies in 18 months. Lily won't even look at most people. But you understand kids who can't find their voice. You always did. You always did. Because he remembered. He remembered the girl she'd been, too shy to raise her hand in class, too anxious to speak up in groups, until she'd found her voice through helping others find theirs. Michael, if I take this job, then we're professionals. I'm a client, you're a specialist. We can do that. But his eyes said something else entirely. His eyes said he'd never forgotten her either. A soft knock interrupted them. The door opened to reveal Jake again, this time dragging a little girl with dark curls and Michael's unmistakable gray eyes. She clung to his hand but wouldn't look up, wouldn't meet Emma's gaze. Lily wanted to see, Jake announced. I told her you might be able to help her find her words. Emma's heart clenched. This little girl, carrying grief too heavy for 6-year-old shoulders, surrounded by love but trapped in silence. This was why she'd become a specialist. This was her calling, standing right in front of her in the form of a child who needed her expertise. She crouched down to Lily's level, careful not to reach out, not to overwhelm. Hi Lily. I'm Emma. Your daddy tells me you have a lot of thoughts in your head, but sometimes they get stuck before they come out of your mouth. The tiniest nod. That happens to me too sometimes. Even now, as a grown-up. Emma's voice was gentle, professional, but underneath ran a current of truth. Sometimes the most important things are the hardest to say. Behind Lily, Michael went very still. But maybe we can work on finding those words together. Would you like that? Another tiny nod. Emma straightened, her decision made despite every rational instinct screaming at her to run. I'll take the case. Relief flooded Michael's face like sunrise. Thank you. But we need ground rules. I'm here for them. Professional boundaries are non-negotiable. Of course. And I'll need full access to their history, their routines, their triggers. Whatever you need. What she needed was to protect her heart from the man who'd shaped it 15 years ago and was looking at her now like she was salvation itself. I'll start Monday, she said instead. Emma spent the weekend researching selective mutism and trying not to think about Michael Blackwood's hands. Or his voice. Or the way he'd looked at her like 15 years had been 15 minutes. She sat in her small Capitol Hill apartment, surrounded by case studies and therapeutic journals, but her mind kept drifting to storm gray eyes and the way his voice had cracked when he'd said please. Professional distance. That's what she needed. Clear boundaries, clinical detachment, and absolutely no thinking about how his shoulders had filled out that expensive suit or how his cologne still smelled like cedar and something uniquely him. Her phone buzzed Saturday evening, interrupting her review of communication therapy techniques. Jake has a fever. Lily won't let me near her. Can you start tomorrow instead of Monday? Michael. Emma stared at the text for a full 5 minutes, her thumb hovering over the keyboard. This was exactly what she'd been afraid of. The blurred lines, the emergency calls, the way he could pull her into his orbit with a single message. A professional would recommend he call his pediatrician. A professional would suggest waiting until their scheduled start date. She typed back, on my way. Because despite every rational thought screaming at her to maintain boundaries, she couldn't ignore the desperation in those few words. And because somewhere in that expensive house across town, 2 grieving children needed help, and she'd never been able to turn her back on a child in crisis. The drive to Bellevue felt longer than it should have, Seattle's evening traffic giving her too much time to second-guess her decision. She changed clothes 3 times, too casual, too formal, too much like she was trying to impress him. She'd settled on dark jeans and a soft sweater, professional but approachable, the kind of outfit that said competent therapist, and definitely not woman who's been thinking about her client's father for 2 days straight. The driveway curved through perfectly manicured landscaping, and the house itself seemed to glow from within, warm light spilling from floor-to-ceiling windows that offered glimpses of a life she'd never been part of. What she hadn't expected was Michael answering the door in rumpled clothes, hair disheveled, looking like he'd been through a war. His usually perfect appearance was completely undone, shirt wrinkled, sleeves rolled up, a small stain on his chest that looked suspiciously like children's medicine. The sight of him so vulnerable, so human, made something flutter in her chest that had nothing to do with professional concern. "Thank God," he breathed, and she could hear the relief in his voice. "Jake's temperature spiked an hour ago, and Lily, she's been hiding in her closet since I tried to give him medicine. I don't know what I'm doing wrong, Em. I've read every parenting book, consulted with pediatricians, but when they're both falling apart at the same time." He was rambling, she realized. Michael Blackwood, who commanded boardrooms and negotiated million-dollar deals, was completely undone by two sick children. The vulnerability in his admission made her heart ache in ways that had nothing to do with professional sympathy. "Where's Jake now?" she asked, stepping into the foyer and trying not to notice how the house smelled like him, that cedar scent mixed with something warm and domestic. "Living room. He keeps asking for his mom and I don't know what to tell him. Every time he gets sick, he gets scared that something bad will happen. I think he's afraid that if he's not careful, he might disappear like Sarah did." "Michael." She touched his arm without thinking, felt him go completely still under her fingers. His skin was warm through the thin cotton of his shirt, and for a moment she forgot about professional boundaries and 6-year-old patience. For a moment, she was 18 again, standing in the rain outside the library, too scared to say what mattered, too terrified to reach for what she wanted. "Breathe," she said softly. "Kids get sick. This isn't your fault." He looked down at her hand on his sleeve and she saw something flicker in his eyes. Recognition, longing, the same awareness that was making her pulse race. The air between them felt charged, heavy with 15 years of unspoken words and missed opportunities. Then Jake's voice called out from somewhere deeper in the house. "Daddy. My tummy hurts." The spell broke. Michael stepped back, running a hand through his already disheveled hair, and Emma let her hand fall to her side, immediately missing the warmth of contact. "Right?" Michael said, his voice rough. "Jake. He's been asking for you specifically since Friday. I don't know how he knows, but he keeps saying he wants to talk to the lady who helps kids feel better." Emma followed him through the house. The living room was dominated by a massive sectional sofa where Jake lay curled up like a small, miserable ball. He was clutching a stuffed dinosaur that had clearly seen better days, his dark hair damp with fever sweat, his face flushed and tear-streaked. When he saw Emma, his eyes, so much like Michael's, lit up with recognition and hope. "Emma," he said, his voice small and scratchy but genuinely pleased. "You came. Daddy said you might not come until Monday, but I told him you would come if we needed you." The simple faith in his voice made Emma's heart clench. She crouched beside the sofa so she was at his eye level, noting the flush of fever across his cheeks and the way he was holding himself carefully, as if movement might make everything worse. "Of course I came, buddy," she said gently. "Your daddy told me you're not feeling very good. My tummy hurts and my head feels hot and Daddy keeps trying to give me yucky medicine that makes me throw up." Jake's lower lip trembled. "I don't want to take it, but Daddy says I have to, and then I get scared that—" He trailed off, but Emma could see the fear in his eyes, the same terror that had been haunting him since Sarah's death. Not fear of illness itself, but fear of what sudden changes might mean, fear that feeling bad might be the first step toward disappearing forever. "You get scared that something bad might happen if you're sick," Emma said softly, and Jake nodded, tears spilling over his flushed cheeks. "When Mommy Sarah got hurt in the car, she was okay at first," Jake whispered. "But then she got worse and worse and the doctors couldn't make her better and then she went to sleep and never woke up. What if I get worse too?" Behind her, Emma heard Michael's sharp intake of breath, and she could practically feel his guilt and helplessness radiating across the room. This was the fear that had been driving Jake's resistance to medicine, his panic every time he felt unwell, the terror that any kind of physical distress might be the beginning of the end. "Oh, sweetheart," Emma said, her voice soft but steady. "I can understand why you might be scared about that. When someone we love gets hurt and then dies, it can make us worry that the same thing might happen to us, especially when we don't feel good." Jake nodded miserably. "But what happened to your mommy was very different from having a fever," Emma continued carefully. "Your mommy was hurt very badly in the car accident, and her body couldn't heal from those injuries. A fever is actually your body's way of fighting off germs, like having a whole army inside you that makes you hot while they work to make you better. It's not the same kind of hurt at all." "But what if the medicine doesn't work?" Jake asked, his voice barely a whisper. Then we try different medicine or we wait for your body to fight off the germs on its own, Emma said matter-of-factly. But you know what? Your daddy has been taking care of you and Lily for a long time now, and you've both been sick before and gotten better, right? Yeah, Jake said slowly. I had chicken pox last year and that cough that lasted forever. And did you get better? Yeah, but the chicken pox was really itchy and Daddy had to put that pink stuff all over me. A small smile tugged at the corner of Jake's mouth. He looked really worried, but I got better. Emma smiled back, glancing at Michael, who was watching the interaction with something that looked like amazement. I bet he was worried. That's what people who love us do, they worry when we're not feeling good. But you got better because your daddy took good care of you, and because your body knew exactly how to heal itself. Some of the tension left Jake's small frame, and he shifted slightly on the sofa, no longer curled up in a defensive ball. But the medicine still tastes gross. It does, Emma agreed. Most medicine tastes pretty awful. But sometimes if we take tiny sips instead of trying to swallow it all at once, our bellies are happier. And sometimes it helps if we have something good to taste right after, like a popsicle or a little bit of juice. Daddy doesn't usually let us have popsicles when we're sick, Jake said, shooting a hopeful look toward Michael. Well, Emma said conspiratorially, I think when you're brave enough to take medicine that tastes yucky, you've earned a popsicle. What do you think, Daddy? Michael's smile was the first genuine one she'd seen since she'd arrived. I think Emma's right. Being brave definitely deserves a popsicle. It took another 20 minutes of gentle coaxing, but eventually Jake managed to keep down half a dose of fever reducer, followed by a cherry popsicle that turned his tongue bright red and made him giggle for the first time all evening. Emma sat with him while he dozed, one hand resting lightly on his forehead to monitor his temperature, the other holding the book he'd asked her to read, something about dinosaurs that went on adventures and always found their way home. Michael had disappeared into the kitchen, and she could hear him moving around, the soft clink of dishes and the quiet hum of the coffee maker. The domestic sounds were soothing, creating a bubble of normalcy around the crisis that had brought her here. Emma found herself relaxing into the moment, into the simple pleasure of helping a child feel better, of being useful in a way that mattered. Emma? Jake's voice was drowsy, but he was looking at her with those serious gray eyes. Yeah, buddy? Are you gonna stay and help Lily talk? She's been really quiet since the accident, and Daddy tries to help but he doesn't know the right words. Maybe you know the right words. The question was innocent enough, but it carried weight that made Emma's chest tight. That's the plan. Would you like that? Yeah. Lily's been really sad and sometimes I hear her crying at night, but she won't tell me what's wrong. And Daddy? Jake's voice dropped to a whisper. Daddy gets really sad too, but he tries to hide it. Maybe you can help him too. Out of the mouths of babes. Emma smoothed Jake's hair back from his forehead, feeling the fever starting to break. I'll do my best to help both of them. Sometimes it just takes time. Good, Jake said with 6-year-old certainty. Daddy needs help. He works all the time now and sometimes I think he forgets that we're here. Not on purpose, he added quickly as if defending Michael. But like, his brain is always thinking about work stuff instead of fun stuff. The observation was delivered with such matter-of-fact honesty that Emma had to bite back a smile. Children had a way of cutting straight to the heart of things, and apparently Jake had noticed what many adults missed. That Michael was struggling to balance his responsibilities, using work as a shield against the overwhelming nature of sudden parenthood and unprocessed grief. Maybe we can help him remember about the fun stuff too, Emma said softly. Jake's eyes were already drifting closed again, the combination of medicine and exhaustion finally winning out. Emma stayed beside him until his breathing evened out into the deep rhythm of sleep, then carefully extracted herself from the sofa and went in search of Michael. She found him in the kitchen, standing at the island with his hands wrapped around a coffee mug, staring out at the dark expanse of Lake Washington. The lights of the city twinkled in the distance, and the rain that had started while she was with Jake created patterns on the glass that caught and scattered the warm light from inside. He looked lost in thought, his shoulders carrying the weight of responsibility and worry that seemed to be his constant companion. How did you do that? He asked without turning around, his voice soft with something that might have been a wonder. Experience, Emma said, accepting the mug of coffee he offered her without looking. And remembering that kids need the truth just in smaller, less scary pieces. He's been having nightmares about the accident since Sarah died, Michael admitted, his voice rough with exhaustion and guilt. Not just about the crash itself but about what came after. The hospital, the machines, the way she just faded away. I thought I was protecting him by not talking about the details, but maybe I was just making it worse. Sometimes protection can feel like secrets to a child, and secrets feel scary, Emma said gently. Kids have incredible imaginations, and when they don't have all the information, they fill in the blanks with worst-case scenarios. Jake's been carrying around the fear that any kind of physical distress might be the beginning of losing someone else he loves. Including himself, Michael said quietly. Including himself, Emma confirmed. Survivor's guilt is real, even in children. Sometimes kids who live through traumatic events feel guilty that they survived when someone else didn't. They start to believe that they don't deserve to be safe or healthy. The word, together, hung in the air between them, loaded with implications that had nothing to do with professional relationships and everything to do with the way he was looking at her like she was the answer to prayers he'd been too afraid to voice. "Stay," he said suddenly. "Tonight. Please. I know it's not professional, but Jake's fever might spike again, and if Lily has a nightmare." Emma knew she should say no. Knew that spending the night was crossing lines that would be difficult to uncross. But looking at this man who was trying so hard to hold everything together, thinking about 2 children who were slowly learning to trust her, she found herself nodding. "I'll take the guest room." Relief flooded his features. "Thank you." The next morning brought weak Seattle sunshine and the uncomfortable realization that Emma had spent another night in Michael Blackwood's house. She'd lain awake for hours, hyper-aware of him just down the hall, of the domestic intimacy of sharing space with this family that was becoming far too important to her. She found Michael in the kitchen again, this time fully dressed in a business suit, looking every inch the successful CEO except for the exhaustion in his eyes. "Early meeting," he explained, handing her a cup of coffee. "But I wanted to wait until you were up." Jake's fever broke completely around 5, and Lily, she came out of the closet around midnight. "I found her asleep in her own bed this morning." "That's progress," Emma said, accepting the coffee gratefully. She felt safe enough to leave her hiding place. "Because of you." The intensity in his voice made her look up, and she found him watching her with an expression that made her pulse quicken. There was gratitude there, yes, but also something deeper, something that spoke of feelings that had nothing to do with professional appreciation. "Michael." "I know," he said quickly. "I know this is complicated. But I can't pretend that having you here doesn't feel right in ways that have nothing to do with therapy." Before Emma could respond, small footsteps on the stairs announced Jake's arrival. He appeared in the kitchen doorway in dinosaur pajamas, hair sticking up at impossible angles, looking significantly better than he had the night before. "Morning, Daddy." "Morning, Emma." He climbed into Michael's arms with the easy affection of a child who'd never doubted his place in the world. "Is Lily still sleeping?" "She is," Michael said, smoothing Jake's hair. "But she talked to Emma last night." Jake's eyes went wide. "Really? What did she say?" "She told me about her stuffed animal," Emma said. "Bunny." "Oh, Bunny's her favorite. She's had her since we were babies. Mommy Sarah gave us each a stuffed animal when we were born. I got T-Rex and Lily got Bunny." Jake's expression grew thoughtful. "Maybe she's ready to talk because you're here. You make things feel safer." The simple observation from a 6-year-old carried more weight than any professional assessment. Emma felt something shift in her chest, a recognition that her role in this family was evolving beyond anything she'd planned or prepared for. "I hope so," she said softly. "Are you staying for breakfast?" Jake asked hopefully. Emma looked at Michael, saw the question in his eyes that echoed his son's but carried far more complexity. "I should probably go home, get some clean clothes." "But you'll come back?" Jake's voice carried a note of anxiety that made Emma's heart clench. "You'll come back and help Lily talk more?" "Yes," Emma said, the word coming out before she could second-guess herself. "I'll come back." Michael's smile was soft and grateful and full of something that looked dangerously like hope. Over the next week, Emma fell into a routine that felt both natural and terrifying. She arrived each morning around 9, after Michael had left for work and the children had finished breakfast. Jake would greet her with enthusiasm, chattering about his dreams or his toys or whatever 6-year-old concern was occupying his mind that day. Lily was more cautious. She would watch Emma from doorways and around corners, never quite hiding but never fully engaging either. But each day brought small progress, a nod in response to a question, a gesture toward something she wanted, and occasionally, a single word whispered so quietly Emma had to strain to hear it. Juice, when she was thirsty. Book, when she wanted a story read. Outside, when the rain stopped and she wanted to play in the garden. Each word felt like a victory, a small crack in the wall of silence that had surrounded her for 6 months. Emma documented everything, noting patterns and triggers, building a comprehensive picture of Lily's communication style and comfort levels. But it was the moments between therapy that began to matter most. The way Lily would curl up next to Emma during story time, not speaking but clearly listening. The way she would bring Emma drawings, elaborate crayon masterpieces that told stories her voice couldn't yet manage. The way she would take Emma's hand when they walked through the house, a small gesture of trust that felt more significant than any breakthrough in formal therapy. Jake, meanwhile, had appointed himself Emma's assistant and tour guide. He showed her every corner of the house, introduced her to every toy, and provided running commentary on family history and dynamics with the brutal honesty that only children possessed. "Daddy used to smile more before Mommy Sarah died," he told her one afternoon as they built an elaborate Lego castle. Not fake smiles like he does now, but real ones that made his eyes crinkle up. "He's been through a lot," Emma said carefully. "Sometimes when grown-ups are sad, it takes time for the real smiles to come back. Do you think you can help him remember how to smile for real again?" The question was asked with such innocent hope that Emma felt her throat tighten. "I think your daddy's real smiles are still there. He just needs to remember that it's okay to be happy sometimes, even when he misses someone. Like how I can be happy playing with you even though I miss Mommy Sarah?" Exactly like that. Jake considered this with the seriousness he brought to all important matters. "I think Daddy likes you. Not just because you're helping Lily, but because you make him look less worried." Emma's pulse quickened. "What makes you think that?" "He checks his phone a lot when you're not here, but when you are here he forgets about it. And yesterday I heard him humming in the shower, and he hasn't done that in forever." The observation was delivered with matter-of-fact certainty, but it carried implications that made Emma's chest flutter with something that felt dangerously like hope mixed with terror. Because the truth was, she was becoming attached to this family in ways that went far beyond professional obligation. She looked forward to Jake's morning hugs and Lily's shy smiles. She found herself thinking about Michael during the evenings, wondering how his day had gone, whether he'd eaten dinner, if he was working too late again. And when he came home each evening, when his face lit up at seeing her still there, when he asked about the children's day with genuine interest and gratitude, she felt something inside her chest that she'd been trying to ignore for weeks. She was falling in love with all of them. The realization should have terrified her. Should have sent her running back to the safety of professional boundaries and emotional distance. Instead, it made her want to stay even more. 3 weeks into their new routine, Emma arrived at the Blackwood house to find chaos. Jake was sitting on the kitchen floor in his school uniform, tears streaming down his face, while Lily stood frozen by the refrigerator, clutching Bunny to her chest with wide, terrified eyes. "What happened?" Emma asked, immediately dropping to Jake's level. "Daddy had to go to New York," Jake sobbed. "He said it was just for 2 days, but what if his plane crashes? What if he doesn't come back like Mommy Sarah didn't come back?" Emma's heart clenched. She'd known this day would come. Michael couldn't avoid business travel forever, but she hadn't anticipated how deeply it would trigger the children's abandonment fears. "Where's Mrs. Smith?" Emma asked, referring to the housekeeper who usually stayed with the children during Emma's off hours. "She got sick," Jake hiccuped. "Daddy called you but you didn't answer, and then he had to leave for the airport and he looked really worried and—" Emma pulled out her phone, seeing 3 missed calls from Michael and a text sent 20 minutes ago. "Emergency trip to NYC. Mrs. Smith has flu. Can you stay with kids? We'll pay whatever you need. Desperate." Oh. She stared at the message, her professional training warring with her personal feelings. Staying overnight crossed every boundary she'd established, but looking at Jake's tear-streaked face and Lily's terrified silence, she knew she couldn't walk away. She typed back quickly, "Here now. Kids are safe. Focus on your meeting." "Okay," Emma said, gathering Jake into her arms while keeping one eye on Lily, who hadn't moved from her spot by the refrigerator. "Let's talk about this. Your daddy had to go to New York for work, right?" Jake nodded miserably. "And he told you he'd be back in 2 days?" Another nod. "Jake, look at me." Emma waited until his tear-filled eyes met hers. "Your daddy has been on airplanes lots of times for work, hasn't he? Even since you and Lily came to live with him?" "Yeah, but—" "And he's always come back, right?" "Yeah, but what if this time is different? What if something bad happens and we're all alone?" Emma glanced at Lily, who was watching the conversation with the intensity of a child trying to understand whether her world was about to collapse again. The little girl's breathing was shallow, rapid, and Emma recognized the signs of an impending panic attack. "Lily, sweetheart, come here," Emma said gently, extending her free arm. Lily shook her head, pressing herself harder against the refrigerator. "Scared," she whispered, the word barely audible but filled with such raw terror that Emma felt her chest tighten. "I know you're scared," Emma said softly, "but I'm going to stay here with you until your daddy gets back. We're going to take care of each other, okay? Promise?" Jake asked, his voice small and desperate. Emma hesitated. Making promises to traumatize children was dangerous territory. Broken promises could shatter trust that took months to rebuild. But looking at their faces, seeing the genuine terror in their eyes, she made a decision that went against every professional instinct she had. "I promise," she said firmly. "I'm not going anywhere." It took another hour to calm both children down. Lily eventually allowed Emma to coax her away from the refrigerator, but she remained hypervigilant, jumping at every sound and checking the windows obsessively as if expecting bad news to arrive at any moment. Jake clung to Emma's side, asking the same questions over and over. "When will Daddy call? What if his phone doesn't work? What if he forgets about us?" Emma found herself drawing on every technique she'd learned for managing acute anxiety in children, but this felt different from her usual therapy sessions. This was raw, immediate, and deeply personal in ways that made her question everything she thought she knew about professional boundaries. That evening, after a dinner that neither child really ate and baths that required extensive negotiation, Emma found herself tucked between both children on Michael's massive sectional sofa, her laptop balanced on her knees as they video called him in his New York hotel room. "There's my favorite people," Michael said, his face filling the screen. Even through the pixelated connection, Emma could see the exhaustion in his eyes, the worry lines that had deepened since morning. "Daddy?" Jake practically shouted, bouncing with excitement. "Emma stayed with us all day and we made cookies and Lily helped measure the flour." "That sounds amazing, buddy. Are you being good for Emma?" "The best," Jake said solemnly. "And Lily said more when we were making cookies." She said it 3 times. Michael's eyes found Emma's through the screen, and she saw the gratitude there mixed with something deeper, something that made her pulse quicken despite the innocent presence of the children beside her. "That's wonderful, Lily," Michael said gently. "I'm so proud of you for using your words." Lily leaned closer to the screen, studying her father's face with the intensity she brought to everything important. "Come home," she said, the words clear and deliberate. Emma's breath caught. It was the longest sentence Lily had spoken since the accident. "Tomorrow night, sweetheart. I promise. One more sleep and then I'll be home." "Promise, promise?" Jake added, needing the extra reassurance. "Promise, promise," Michael confirmed, and Emma could hear the emotion in his voice. But as they were saying goodbye, Lily suddenly grabbed the laptop screen, her small hands leaving fingerprints on the glass. "No go," she cried out, her voice rising to a pitch Emma had never heard before. "No go away. Stay. Stay." The desperation in her voice was heartbreaking, and Emma watched as Michael's face crumpled with guilt and helplessness. "Lily, sweetheart, I have to finish my work, but I'll be home tomorrow." "No." Lily screamed, and suddenly she was sobbing, great heaving sobs that shook her entire small frame. "Everyone goes away. Everyone leaves. Don't leave." Emma quickly ended the call and gathered Lily into her arms, feeling the child's body trembling with the force of her breakdown. This wasn't just about Michael's trip. This was 18 months of suppressed grief and terror finally erupting. "I've got you," Emma whispered, rocking Lily gently. "I've got you and I'm not going anywhere." It took 2 hours to calm Lily down, and even then she refused to let go of Emma's hand. Jake, frightened by his sister's breakdown, had curled up on Emma's other side, and Emma found herself essentially pinned to the sofa by 2 traumatized children who were terrified of being abandoned again. Her phone buzzed with a text from Michael. "Is she okay? Should I come home tonight?" Emma typed back one-handed, "She's calming down. Don't come home early, that will teach them that panic brings you back." "We'll manage." "Are you sure?" "I'm sure." "But Michael, we need to talk about their separation anxiety. This is bigger than I initially assessed. When I get back." "And Emma, thank you. I don't know what I would have done without you." Emma stared at the message, feeling the weight of responsibility settling on her shoulders. She wasn't just their therapist anymore. She was their anchor, their safe person, the one they turned to when their world felt like it was falling apart. The realization should have terrified her. Instead, it felt like coming home. The next day brought new challenges. Lily woke up from a nightmare at 3 a.m., screaming for her daddy, and it took Emma an hour to convince her that he was safe and coming home. Jake wet the bed for the first time in months, too embarrassed to tell Emma until she found him trying to change the sheets himself. "Accidents happen, buddy," Emma said gently, helping him strip the bed. "Even to big kids when they're worried about someone they love." "I'm not a baby," Jake said, his lower lip trembling. Of course you're not. You're a very brave boy who's been taking care of his sister and missing his daddy. Sometimes our bodies react to big feelings in ways we can't control. But it was Lily's behavior that concerned Emma most. The little girl had become hypervigilant, following Emma from room to room, checking locks on doors and windows, asking "safe?" over and over again. She'd regressed in her speech, back to single words and gestures, as if the previous weeks of progress had been erased by one night of terror. This is normal, Emma told herself as she documented Lily's behaviors in her notes. Regression is common during times of stress. But watching this child she'd grown to love struggle with such intense fear made Emma question everything about her professional approach. Maybe she'd pushed too hard, too fast. Maybe she'd given them a false sense of security that crumbled the moment their primary caregiver left. That evening, Michael's flight was delayed, and Emma found herself putting both children to bed alone, fielding their anxious questions about why Daddy wasn't home yet. She called Michael twice for reassurance calls, watching his tired face on the screen as he explained about weather delays and promised he'd be home as soon as possible. What if the plane can't fly in the storm? Jake asked during the second call. Then Daddy will stay in the airport hotel until it's safe to fly, Emma explained. Airlines don't let planes take off unless it's completely safe. But what if? Jake, Emma interrupted gently. I know you have a lot of what-ifs in your head right now. But worrying about things that might happen doesn't keep the people we love safe. It just makes us feel scared for no reason. How do you stop worrying? Jake asked, his voice small. You don't stop completely, Emma said honestly. But you can choose to focus on what you know is true instead of what you're afraid might happen. And what we know is true is that your daddy loves you, he's coming home tomorrow, and you're safe with me tonight. Lily, who had been silent during this exchange, suddenly spoke up. Emma, stay. The question carried weight far beyond the immediate situation. Emma could see in Lily's eyes that she wasn't just asking about tonight. She was asking about permanence, about whether Emma would be another adult who disappeared from their lives without warning. I'm here, sweetheart, Emma said carefully. I'm here for as long as you need me. It wasn't quite a promise, but it was as close as she could come without crossing lines she wasn't ready to cross. It was nearly midnight when she heard Michael's key in the lock. Emma was dozing on the sofa, having decided to wait up to make sure he made it home safely. She heard him drop his bags in the foyer, heard his quiet footsteps as he checked on both children, and then he was standing in the living room doorway, looking at her with an expression that made her heart race. You waited up, he said softly. I wanted to make sure you got home okay. The kids were worried about the delay. And you? Were you worried? Emma looked at this man who'd become so important to her, who'd trusted her with his children and his heart, and decided that maybe it was time to stop hiding behind professional distance. Yes, she said simply. I was worried. Michael crossed the room slowly as if giving her time to object or pull away. When she didn't, he sat beside her on the sofa, close enough that she could smell his cologne and see the exhaustion in his eyes. Emma, these past 2 days, watching you with them, seeing how they trust you, how they turn to you when they're scared. He paused, running a hand through his hair. I can't keep pretending this is just professional anymore. Michael. I know this is complicated. I know there are rules and boundaries and probably a dozen reasons why this is a bad idea. But I also know that I'm falling in love with you, and I think you might be falling in love with us too. Emma's breath caught. There it was, the truth they'd been dancing around for weeks, laid bare with the kind of honesty that left no room for professional deflection. You're right, she whispered. About all of it. The complications, the boundaries, the bad idea part. And yes, about the falling in love part too. Michael's smile was soft and relieved and full of promise. So what do we do now? I don't know, Emma admitted. This is uncharted territory for me. I've never fallen for a client's family before. For me too. But I know I don't want to go back to pretending this is just professional. I know I want you in our lives not just as their therapist but as more. Emma thought about the past 2 days, about how natural it had felt to comfort the children, to be the one they called when their world felt unstable. She thought about professional ethics and the potential complications and all the ways this could go wrong. But she also thought about Jake's trust and Lily's breakthrough and the way this family had become the most important thing in her world. We'll have to be careful, she said finally. The children's well-being has to come first, always. Always, Michael agreed. And we'll need to figure out how to separate my role as their therapist from whatever this becomes. We will. And if it doesn't work out, if we try this and it falls apart, then we'll handle it like adults who care more about those kids than about our own feelings, Michael said firmly. But Emma, I don't think it's going to fall apart. I think we're going to be amazing together. As Emma finally headed to the guest room, she found herself thinking about the past 48 hours, about how seamlessly she'd stepped into the role of caregiver and protector. For the first time in 15 years, she allowed herself to believe that maybe, just maybe, she deserved this kind of happiness. Maybe they all did. The morning after Michael's return brought an unexpected challenge. Emma arrived to find him in the kitchen, still in his pajamas at 9 a.m., staring at his laptop with the kind of intensity usually reserved for board meetings. "You're not at work," she observed, setting down her bag. "Called in sick," he said without looking up. "After what happened while I was gone, I can't just pretend everything's normal." Emma poured herself coffee from the pot he'd already made, noting the dark circles under his eyes. "Michael, you can't stop traveling for work entirely. The children need to learn that people can leave and come back safely." "Can they?" "Because Lily barely slept last night, and Jake asked me 17 times if I was going to work today." Before Emma could respond, small footsteps announced Jake's arrival. He appeared in the doorway wearing mismatched socks and a dinosaur shirt, his hair sticking up at impossible angles. "Daddy? You're still here." The relief in his voice was palpable as he launched himself into Michael's arms. "I'm here, buddy. I told you I wasn't going anywhere today. But what about tomorrow? And the day after that?" Michael looked helplessly at Emma over Jake's head. This was exactly what she'd been afraid of, that avoiding the problem would only make the children's anxiety worse. "Jake," Emma said gently, "can you help me understand something? What's the scariest part about Daddy going to work?" Jake considered this with the seriousness he brought to all important questions. "What if he doesn't come back? What if something bad happens and we never see him again?" "That's a really big worry," Emma acknowledged. "And it makes sense that you'd be scared about that, especially after what happened to Mommy Sarah." "But Daddy's not going to die in a car accident at work," Jake said as if trying to convince himself. "You're right, he's not. But your brain is trying to protect you by worrying about all the things that could go wrong. That's what brains do when someone we love has been hurt before." Lily appeared in the doorway, clutching Bunny and watching the conversation with wide eyes. She'd been even more withdrawn since Michael's return, as if his brief absence had confirmed her worst fears about the temporary nature of love. "Morning, sweetheart," Michael said softly. "Did you sleep okay?" Lily shook her head, then walked over to Emma and leaned against her legs, a gesture that didn't go unnoticed by Michael. "Bad dreams?" Emma asked. "Daddy gone?" Lily whispered. "Everyone gone." Emma's chest tightened. This was the heart of it, not just fear of abandonment, but the bone-deep certainty that everyone she loved would eventually disappear. "Lily, look at me," Emma said, crouching down to the child's eye level. "I know it feels like people go away and don't come back. That happened with Mommy Sarah, and it was the worst thing that could happen." Lily nodded, tears already forming in her eyes. "But Daddy came back from New York, didn't he? Just like he promised." Another nod. "And I came back yesterday morning even though I went home to sleep. But what if next time you don't come back?" Lily's voice was barely audible. The question pierced Emma's professional armor. She'd been trained to avoid making promises she couldn't keep, to maintain therapeutic distance. But looking into this child's terrified eyes, all her training felt inadequate. "Lily, I can't promise that nothing bad will ever happen," Emma said carefully. "But I can promise that I will always try my hardest to come back to you. And if something ever happened that meant I couldn't come back, there would be other people who love you to take care of you." "Like who?" "Like Daddy? Like Jake? Like Mrs. Smith and your teachers and all the people who care about you." Lily considered this, then asked the question that broke Emma's heart. "But what if they all go away too?" Michael made a sound that might have been a sob, and Emma saw her own pain reflected in his eyes. "How do you reassure a child who's learned that the worst thing imaginable can actually happen?" "Then we would find new people to love you," Emma said simply. "Because you are worth loving, Lily. You are worth taking care of. And there will always be someone who wants to do that." It wasn't a perfect answer, but it was an honest one. And sometimes, Emma had learned, honesty was more comforting than false promises. Over the next few weeks, they developed new routines designed to help the children feel more secure. Michael started working from home 2 days a week, setting up his laptop at the kitchen table so the children could see him throughout the day. When he did have to travel, they created a countdown calendar and scheduled video calls at specific times. But the changes came with unexpected consequences. Emma arrived one morning to find Michael on a heated phone call with his business partner. "I understand the client is frustrated, David, but I can't just drop everything and fly to Tokyo right now. No, it's not about the money. Because I have responsibilities here that are more important than any deal. Emma watched him pace the kitchen, his jaw tight with frustration. When he hung up, he looked defeated. Problems? She asked gently. The Yamamoto account. They want face-to-face meetings, and David thinks I'm being unreasonable by refusing to travel internationally right now. Michael slumped into a chair. Maybe he's right. Maybe I'm letting my personal life interfere with business. Or maybe you're finally prioritizing what actually matters, Emma said. Michael, you've built a successful company. One difficult client isn't going to destroy everything you've worked for. But what if it's not just one client? What if word gets out that Michael Blackwood can't be counted on for important meetings? What if I lose everything I've built? The fear in his voice was raw, and Emma realized this was about more than business. This was about a man who'd lost his sister, inherited 2 traumatized children, and was terrified of failing them the way he felt he'd failed Sarah. You didn't fail her, Emma said softly, reading his thoughts. Didn't I? I was so focused on building the company, on proving myself, that I barely saw her the last few years. I was too busy to notice she was struggling, too important to make time for family dinners or birthday parties. Michael, you were 28 years old, building a business from nothing. You couldn't have known what was going to happen. But I should have been there more. I should have been the kind of brother she could count on. Emma's heart ached for him. You're being the kind of father she would have wanted for her children. You're putting them first, even when it costs you professionally. Is it enough, though? Am I enough for them? Before Emma could answer, Jake appeared in the doorway, having clearly overheard at least part of the conversation. Daddy, are you sad about work again? He asked, climbing into Michael's lap with the easy comfort of a child who'd never doubted his welcome. A little, buddy. Sometimes grown-up work is complicated. Is it because you stay home with us more now? Are we making you lose money? The guilt in Jake's voice made Emma's chest tighten. This was exactly what she'd been afraid of, that the children would blame themselves for Michael's professional struggles. Jake, look at me, Michael said firmly. You and Lily are not making me lose anything. You're the most important things in my life, and I would rather lose every client I have than miss another bedtime story or school play or moment with you. Really? Really? Money can be earned back. Time with the people you love can't. Jake seemed satisfied with this answer, but Emma could see the worry still lingering in his eyes. Children were remarkably perceptive about adult stress, and Jake had already appointed himself the family's emotional caretaker. That afternoon, while the children napped, Emma found herself having a difficult conversation with her supervisor, Dr. Martinez. Emma, I'm concerned about the boundaries in this case, Dr. Martinez said over video call. You're spending 12-hour days with this family, staying overnight during emergencies, becoming emotionally involved in ways that go far beyond therapeutic necessity. The children have complex trauma, Emma defended. They need consistency, stability. They need professional treatment, not a surrogate mother figure. Emma, you're one of our best therapists, but this case is compromising your objectivity. Emma felt a flash of anger. My objectivity isn't what's helping these children heal. It's the fact that they trust me, that they feel safe with me. And what happens when this case ends? When they no longer need therapy? You'll have created an attachment that will be devastating for them to lose. The words landed like a physical blow. Emma had been so focused on helping the children heal that she hadn't fully considered the long-term implications of her involvement. I hadn't thought about that. Emma, I think you need to consider transferring this case to another therapist. Someone who can maintain appropriate professional distance. No. The word came out more forcefully than Emma intended. Dr. Martinez, these children have been through enough loss. Transferring them to another therapist now would be another abandonment, another confirmation that the adults in their lives can't be counted on. Then you need to establish clearer boundaries. Reduce your hours, limit overnight stays, start preparing them for the eventual end of therapeutic services. After the call ended, Emma sat in her car outside the Blackwood house, feeling like her world was tilting off its axis. Dr. Martinez was right about the boundaries, about the professional risks she was taking. But the thought of stepping back, of becoming just another adult who provided services rather than love, felt impossible. Her phone buzzed with a text from Michael. Kids asking where you are. Everything okay? Emma stared at the message, feeling the weight of responsibility and love and professional obligation crushing down on her. She was in too deep, had crossed too many lines, had let herself become essential to a family that wasn't technically hers. But walking away now would destroy the trust she'd spent months building. It would confirm Lily's worst fears about abandonment and leave Jake feeling responsible for another adult's departure. She typed back, "On my way in. Just had to take a call." As she walked up to the front door, Emma could hear Jake's laughter from inside, could see Lily's face pressed against the window watching for her return. These children had become her world and she had become theirs. The ethical implications would have to be dealt with later. Right now they needed her and she couldn't bring herself to let them down. But as she opened the door and was greeted by Jake's enthusiastic hug and Lily's shy smile, Emma couldn't shake the feeling that she was standing at a crossroads that would determine not just her professional future, but the fate of this fragile family she'd grown to love. "Emma," Jake announced. "Lily drew you a picture. Show her, Lily." Lily approached shyly, holding out a crayon drawing of 3 figures holding hands. A tall woman with long hair, a little boy, and a little girl with curls. "It's us," Lily said quietly. "You and me and Jake." Emma noticed that Michael wasn't in the picture, and when she looked up, she saw him watching from the kitchen doorway with an expression she couldn't quite read. "It's beautiful, sweetheart," Emma said, accepting the drawing. "Should we put it on the refrigerator?" Lily nodded enthusiastically, and as Emma hung the picture next to the other family artwork, she realized that somewhere along the way, she'd stopped being their therapist and started being something else entirely. The question was, what happened next? The crisis came on a Tuesday morning in November, when Seattle's gray sky matched the mood that had been building in the Blackwood house for weeks. Emma arrived to find Michael's car still in the driveway at 9 a.m., unusual, since he typically left for the office by 7. She let herself in with the key he'd given her months ago, calling out her usual greeting. "In here," Michael's voice came from the kitchen, but something in his tone made Emma's stomach clench. She found him sitting at the island, still in yesterday's clothes, surrounded by scattered papers and empty coffee cups. His laptop screen showed what looked like financial spreadsheets, and his expression was grim. "Michael? What's wrong?" "Yamamoto pulled their contract," he said without looking up. $3 million gone. And they're not the only ones. Word's gotten out that I'm not reliable for international business anymore." Emma's chest tightened. She'd known this was coming, had seen the signs in his increasingly tense phone calls and late-night work sessions. "How bad is it?" "Bad enough that David wants to buy me out. Says the company can't afford a partner who puts family before profit." Michael's laugh was bitter. "Funny thing is, he's probably right. Where are the kids?" "Still asleep. I didn't have the heart to wake them for school. How do I explain that Daddy might lose everything because he chose them over his career?" Emma moved around the island to stand beside him, close enough to see the exhaustion etched in every line of his face. "Michael, you didn't choose them over your career. You chose to be present for 2 traumatized children who needed stability. Same thing, isn't it?" "No, it's not. It's called being a good father. A good father who might not be able to afford their private school or this house or—" "A good father who shows up," Emma interrupted firmly. "Michael, these children don't need expensive schools or a mansion. They need you. Present, available, emotionally invested you." Michael finally looked at her, and she saw something that looked like desperation in his eyes. "What if it's not enough? What if I can't provide for them the way Sarah would have wanted? Sarah wanted them to be loved and safe. Everything else is just details." Before Michael could respond, small footsteps on the stairs announced Jake's arrival. He appeared in the kitchen doorway in his pajamas, hair disheveled, looking confused. "Daddy? Why aren't you dressed? Are we late for school?" Michael's face immediately shifted into what Emma had come to recognize as his protective parent mask, the expression he wore when he was trying to shield the children from adult problems. "No school today, buddy. I thought we could have a family day." Jake's eyes lit up, but Emma could see him processing the unusual circumstances. "Is everything okay? You look sad." "I'm just tired. Come here." Jake climbed into Michael's lap, and Emma watched as some of the tension left Michael's shoulders. This was what mattered, not board meetings or international contracts, but the weight of a 6-year-old who trusted him completely. "Where's Lily?" Emma asked. "Still sleeping. She had another nightmare around 3 a.m. Something about cars and hospitals." Emma frowned. Lily's nightmares had been decreasing over the past month, but stress in the household often triggered regression in traumatized children. "She's picking up on your anxiety," Emma said quietly. "Kids are like emotional sponges." "Great. So now I'm traumatizing them with my work problems." "You're not traumatizing anyone. But we might need to have an age-appropriate conversation about what's happening." Michael's expression grew alarmed. "I can't tell them I might lose the company. They're already terrified of losing people they love. I'm not suggesting you tell them everything. But children sense when adults are keeping secrets, and their imaginations usually come up with scenarios worse than reality. As if summoned by their conversation, Lily appeared in the doorway, clutching Bunny and looking around the kitchen with the hypervigilant expression that meant she was assessing for danger. "Morning, sweetheart," Emma said gently. "How are you feeling?" "Scared," Lily said simply, which was progress. 6 months ago she wouldn't have been able to name her emotions. "What's making you feel scared?" Lily looked between Michael and Emma, then walked over to Michael's chair. "Daddy's sad. Jake's worried. House feels wrong." The observation was remarkably perceptive for a 6-year-old, and it confirmed Emma's suspicion that Lily was absorbing the household's emotional turmoil. "You're very good at noticing feelings," Emma said. "It's true that Daddy's been worried about some grown-up things. But that doesn't mean anything bad is going to happen to our family." "What kind of grown-up things?" Jake asked, his natural curiosity overriding his usual tact. Michael looked helplessly at Emma, clearly out of his depth. This was uncharted territory. How do you explain business failure to children who've already lost everything once? "Sometimes," Emma said carefully, "grown-ups have to make difficult decisions about work. Your daddy's been trying to figure out how to balance taking care of you and taking care of his business." "Is Daddy in trouble at work?" Jake's voice was small, worried. "Not trouble exactly," Michael said, finding his voice. "But some of the people I work with think I should travel more for business, and I don't want to be away from you and Lily that much." "Because of what happened when you went to New York?" Lily asked quietly. Michael's expression grew pained. "Partly yes. I realized that being with you is more important to me than any business meeting." "But now the work people are mad?" Jake pressed. "Some of them are disappointed," Michael admitted. "They think I should put work first." "That's stupid," Jake said with 6-year-old indignation. "Families are more important than work." "I agree," Michael said, pulling Jake closer. "But not everyone sees it that way." Lily had been listening to this exchange with the intense focus she brought to all important conversations. Now she walked over to Emma and tugged on her sleeve. "Emma," she said quietly, "are you going to leave too?" The question caught Emma off guard. "What do you mean, sweetheart? If Daddy loses his work, will you still come see us? Or will you go away like everyone else?" Emma's throat tightened. This was the fear she'd been dreading, that the children would connect Michael's professional struggles with potential abandonment. "Lily, I'm not going anywhere," Emma said firmly. "Even if things change with Daddy's work, I'll still be here." "Promise?" Emma hesitated. Dr. Martinez's warnings about creating unsustainable attachments echoed in her mind, but looking at Lily's terrified face, she couldn't bring herself to hedge. "I promise." The relief in Lily's expression was immediate and profound. She climbed into Emma's lap, settling against her with a complete trust that still amazed Emma after all these months. "Good," Lily said simply. "Because you're ours now." The possessive certainty in her voice made Emma's chest tight with emotion. Somewhere along the way she'd stopped being a service provider and become family. The realization was both terrifying and wonderful. That afternoon, while the children played in the backyard, Emma found herself having another difficult conversation, this time with Michael. "I need to tell you something," she said as they watched Jake and Lily build an elaborate fort out of fallen leaves. "Dr. Martinez wants me to transfer your case to another therapist." Michael went very still. "What?" "She thinks I've become too emotionally involved, that I've crossed too many professional boundaries." "And what do you think?" Emma was quiet for a long moment, watching Lily carefully arrange leaves while Jake provided enthusiastic commentary. "I think she's right about the boundaries. I think I stopped being their therapist months ago and became something else entirely." "What did you tell her?" "That I wouldn't abandon them. That they've been through enough loss." Emma turned to face him. "But Michael, this can't continue indefinitely. At some point we're going to have to figure out what this is, what we are." "I know what we are," Michael said quietly. "We're a family. Maybe not in the traditional sense, but that's what this is." "Is it?" "Because from the outside, it looks like a single father who's become dependent on his children's therapist, and a therapist who's lost all professional objectivity." Michael flinched. "Is that really how you see this?" "I don't know how I see it anymore," Emma admitted. "I know I love these children. I know I care about you in ways that have nothing to do with professional obligation. But I also know that what we're doing isn't sustainable." "Why not?" "Because I can't be their therapist and your partner and their mother all at the same time. The roles are incompatible." Michael was quiet for a long moment, processing her words. So what are you saying? That you want to step back? I'm saying we need to make some decisions. About what my role is going forward, about whether this is a professional relationship or a personal one. It stopped being professional the night I called you about Jake's fever, Michael said. Maybe even before that. I know. But we can't keep pretending otherwise. Their conversation was interrupted by Jake's excited voice calling from the yard. Emma! Lily! Come see what we built. They walked over to find an elaborate leaf fort complete with rooms and pathways. Jake was practically bouncing with excitement, while Lily stood quietly beside their creation, a small smile playing at her lips. This is amazing, Emma said, genuinely impressed. Tell me about it. It's a house, Jake explained. This is the living room and this is the kitchen and this is Lily's room and this is my room. What about rooms for the grown-ups? Emma asked. Jake and Lily exchanged a look that seemed to communicate volumes. There's a room for Daddy, Jake said carefully. And a room for you. Right next to each other. Emma felt her cheeks warm. Jake. We know you love each other, Lily said matter-of-factly. We're not babies. You hold hands when you think we're not looking, Jake added. And you smile different when you're together. Emma looked at Michael, who appeared to be fighting back laughter. Apparently we're not as subtle as we thought. Are you going to get married? Lily asked with the directness that only children possessed. Lily, that's a very personal question, Emma said, flustered. But are you? Emma looked at Michael, saw the question in his eyes that echoed his daughter's but carried far more complexity. This was the conversation they'd been avoiding, the decision that would determine not just their future but the children's as well. I don't know, Emma said honestly. Marriage is a big decision that grown-ups have to think about very carefully. But you want to stay with us forever, right? Jake pressed. You want to be our family? The hope in his voice was heartbreaking. These children had already lost so much. How could she explain that love wasn't always enough, that sometimes circumstances and professional obligations and practical considerations mattered too? I want to be part of your family, Emma said carefully. But there are some complicated grown-up things we need to figure out first. Like what? Lily asked. Emma looked at Michael, silently asking for help with this impossible conversation. Like how to make sure everyone is happy and safe and taken care of, Michael said. Sometimes when grown-ups care about each other very much, they have to make difficult decisions about how to build a life together. But you'll figure it out, right? Jake's voice carried a note of anxiety that made Emma's heart clench. You won't let the complicated stuff break up our family? Emma felt the weight of their trust, the enormous responsibility of being someone's safe person. These children had already learned that the adults they loved could disappear without warning. How could she make promises she wasn't sure she could keep? We're going to try very hard to figure it out, she said finally. Because you're both very important to us and we want to do what's best for everyone. It wasn't the definitive answer Jake and Lily were hoping for, but it was honest. And sometimes, Emma had learned, honesty was the best gift you could give a child, even when it wasn't the answer they wanted to hear. That evening after the children were in bed, Emma found herself standing in Michael's kitchen, surrounded by the evidence of the life they'd built together. Family photos on the refrigerator, children's artwork covering every surface, the comfortable chaos of a home filled with love. So, Michael said, joining her by the window that overlooked the lake. What do we do now? Emma looked at this man who'd been her first love and was quickly becoming her last, thought about the children sleeping upstairs who'd claimed her as their own, considered the professional obligations and ethical concerns that seemed insignificant compared to the family they'd created. Now, she said, we figure out how to make this work. All of it. The business problems, the professional boundaries, the complicated logistics of building a life together. And if we can't figure it out? Emma thought about Lily's drawing, about Jake's leaf fort with rooms for all of them, about the promises she'd made and the trust she'd been given. Then we keep trying until we do, she said simply. Because some things are worth fighting for. Michael's smile was soft and grateful and full of love. Yes, he said. They are. The solution came from an unexpected source. Jake's second-grade teacher, Mrs. Patterson. Emma was picking up the children from school when the teacher approached her in the hallway, her expression thoughtful. Miss Smith, could I speak with you for a moment? It's about Jake's family tree project. Emma's stomach clenched. School projects about families were always complicated for children with non-traditional situations. Of course. Is there a problem? Not a problem exactly. But Jake's been asking some interesting questions about how to represent his family structure. He wants to include you on his family tree, but he's not sure what to call you. Emma glanced over at Jake, who was helping Lily with her backpack, his small face serious with concentration. What did you tell him? That families come in all different shapes, and the most important thing is who loves and takes care of you. But he's quite insistent that you belong on his tree. Mrs. Patterson smiled. He told me you're not just a helper person, but family for real. Emma's throat tightened. Mrs. Patterson, the situation is complicated. Most families are, in my experience. But I've been teaching for 20 years and I can tell when a child feels secure and loved. Jake and Lily both light up when they talk about you. Whatever your official title, you're clearly an important part of their world. That evening, Emma found herself staring at Jake's half-finished family tree, spread across the kitchen table. He'd drawn himself and Lily at the bottom, Michael above them, and Sarah in a cloud with angel wings. But there was an empty space next to Michael, and a pencil line leading to where Emma's name was written in careful letters. I don't know where you go, Jake said, appearing beside her. Are you like a mom? Or like an aunt? Or something else? The question was innocent, but it carried the weight of months of uncertainty. Emma looked at this little boy who'd claimed her as family, thought about all the ways their lives had become intertwined. What do you think I am? She asked gently. I think you're Emma, Jake said with 6-year-old logic. And you love us and we love you and you take care of us when we're scared or sick or sad. Isn't that what families do? Before Emma could answer, Michael appeared in the doorway, home earlier than usual from another tense day of meetings with his business partner. How did it go? Emma asked, noting the exhaustion in his posture. David made an offer. A generous one, actually. Enough to buy a smaller house, pay for the kids' education, maybe start something new. And I told him I needed time to think about it. Michael sat down at the table looking at Jake's family tree. Funny thing is, losing the company doesn't scare me as much as I thought it would. What scares me is the idea of starting over without knowing where you fit in all of this. Emma felt something shift in her chest, a recognition that they'd reached a crossroads that couldn't be avoided any longer. Michael. I know we said we'd figure out the complicated parts, but I can't make decisions about my future without knowing if you're going to be part of it. Not as their therapist, not as someone who helps out in emergencies, but as my partner. As their mom. Lily said quietly from the doorway, where she'd been listening with the stealth that only children possessed. Emma's our mom now. Not the mom who made us, but the mom who stays. The simple declaration hung in the air like a truth that had been waiting to be spoken. Emma looked at this little girl who'd found her voice again, at Jake who was nodding enthusiastically, at Michael whose eyes were bright with hope and fear in equal measure. Is that what you want? Michael asked softly. To be their mom? To be my wife? To build something real and permanent and completely outside any professional boundary that's ever existed. Emma thought about Dr. Martinez's warnings, about the career implications, about all the reasons this was the most unprofessional thing she'd ever considered. Then she thought about morning hugs and bedtime stories and the way these children had healed her heart as much as she'd helped heal theirs. Yes, she said simply. Yes to all of it. Michael's smile was radiant as he stood and crossed to her, pulling her into his arms while Jake cheered and Lily clapped her hands together with delight. Are you sure? Michael whispered against her ear. Because once we do this, there's no going back to professional distance. I don't want professional distance, Emma whispered back. I want this chaos and this love and this beautiful, complicated family. Even if it means starting over? New house, new business, new everything? Especially then. We'll build something together, something that's ours. As Michael kissed her, soft and sweet and full of promise, Emma heard Jake's excited voice. Does this mean Emma can be on my family tree for real now? Yes, buddy, Michael said, not taking his eyes off Emma. She can be on our family tree for real. Good, Lily said with satisfaction. Because I already drew her there anyway. Emma laughed, feeling lighter than she had in months. You did. Lily nodded and pointed to the family tree, where Emma now saw her own name written in purple crayon, connected to all of them with carefully drawn lines. I knew you'd say yes, Lily said matter-of-factly. Because you love us too much to leave. Looking at this family that had chosen her as much as she'd chosen them, Emma realized that sometimes the most important decisions weren't about following rules or maintaining boundaries. Sometimes they were about following your heart home. And this chaotic, healing, beautifully imperfect family, was home. So what happens now? Jake asked, bouncing with excitement. Now, Michael said, we figure out how to make it official. All of it. Can we have a wedding? Lily asked hopefully. Would you like that? Emma asked. Yes. With cake and flowers and everything, Then we'll have a wedding, Michael said, his voice full of love and certainty. The biggest, most beautiful wedding Seattle has ever seen. As Emma looked around at the faces of the people who'd become her world, she realized that sometimes the best love stories weren't about finding someone new. Sometimes they were about finding your way back to the person who'd always held your heart, and discovering that the family you'd built together was worth every risk you'd taken to get there. I love you, she whispered to Michael, to Jake, to Lily, to all of them. We love you too, they said back, and Emma knew that whatever challenges lay ahead, they'd face them together. As a family. Finally, completely, and forever. 6 months later, Emma woke up in the guest bedroom of what was now officially their home. Michael had insisted she keep her own space until they were married, a gesture of respect that made her love him even more. The sound of whispered giggles and careful footsteps in the hallway told her the children were up to something. She found them in the kitchen with Michael, all three huddled around something on the counter. When they saw her, Jake practically vibrated with excitement while Lily pressed her lips together in an exaggerated attempt to keep a secret. Good morning, family, Emma said, accepting the coffee Michael handed her. What's all the whispering about? Nothing, Jake said, which immediately made it obvious there was definitely something. Jake, Lily whispered loudly, you're supposed to wait. Wait for what? Emma asked, amused. Michael cleared his throat, suddenly looking nervous in a way she hadn't seen since their first conversation in his office. Actually, there is something. Kids, do you want to show Emma what we made? Lily stepped forward, holding out a piece of construction paper covered in glitter, stickers, and careful crayon writing. At the top, in Michael's handwriting, it read, Will you marry us? Below that, Jake had drawn 4 stick figures holding hands under a rainbow, and Lily had added a house with hearts floating above it. At the bottom, both children had signed their names in wobbly letters. We helped Daddy pick out the ring too, Jake announced, unable to contain himself any longer. It's in his sock drawer, but we're not supposed to tell you that. Jake. Lily protested, but she was giggling. Emma looked up to find Michael watching her with an expression of pure love mixed with anticipation. Emma Smith, he said, dropping to one knee right there in the kitchen while the children bounced with excitement. You walked back into my life and made us whole. You gave Lily her voice back, taught Jake he was safe, and reminded me what love actually looks like. Will you marry us? All of us. Through her tears, Emma saw Jake peek around the corner where he'd been hiding, grinning from ear to ear. Lily bounced on her toes, practically vibrating with excitement. Yes, Emma whispered, then louder, yes to all of you. The kitchen erupted in cheers as both children launched themselves into the group hug. Michael slipped the ring onto her finger, simple, perfect, exactly what she would have chosen, and Emma realized this was what she'd been searching for in every other relationship. Not just love but home. I love you, Michael whispered against her ear as the kids argued over wedding cake flavors. I love you too, she whispered back. All of you. Finally. Outside, Seattle rain tapped against the windows, but inside, the Blackwood family was complete at last. Emma looked around at the chaos, Jake's school projects covering the refrigerator, Lily's artwork taped to every available surface, the comfortable disorder of a home filled with laughter and love, and knew she was exactly where she belonged. Some love stories, she realized, weren't about finding someone new. They were about finding your way back to the person who'd always held your heart, and discovering that the family you built together was worth every risk you'd taken to get there. The Blackwood family was finally, completely, beautifully whole.